This is a compilation video of Quickies that were once uploaded to my main channel. I moved them off there since they were cluttering the place up between my main videos. While I have divided each of them up based on anime season, there may be some things from other anime seasons mixed in there, as I may have watched things that were from a prior season during that one. You will find timestamps for each anime talked about in each of these compilations in the description. Thank you. Anime dropped this year, number 30, Vazzrock the Animation. 1 episode watched, 2 out of 10. Okay, I'll admit that I'm at a disadvantage with this one. I only learned after watching it that this is based off of one of those fictional idol group things that apparently exist mostly in the realm of just albums and audio dramas. I will freely admit that that's just not something I understand at all and doesn't appeal to me. However, as an outsider looking in, even I don't think that this would be satisfying to existing fans that I assume are meant to be the target audience. The animation itself is incredibly stiff and stilted, lacking any personality that I think would sell these characters in any way. The first portion of the episode was mostly just still shots of heads, or maybe from the stomach up, or a wide shot with little more than a moving mouth. It was very rare that expressions even changed. I'm not one to yell at a series for doing this now and then as a way to conserve your budget or energy for when you really need to put everything into a particular scene, but that never really happened here either. It was all like this. The entire thing radiates a sense of cheapness, like they expect you to like it just because of an existing attachment to the source material. I'm sure that will work for some people, but I don't think it's going to work for everyone, and even if it doesn't, fans of a property like this deserve to get something that's higher quality than this show. It's not my kind of thing, for sure, but if it was, I'm sure that this would be highly disappointing. And if part of the goal is to catch new fans with this, then I suspect it is going to fail miserably. They introduce you to 12 characters in what feels like under 3 minutes, and it feels a lot like you're being dropped into the middle of the 3rd season of a show. Granted, with everything that's come before, it basically is a 3rd season, but the way that it's done here is unlikely to win over anyone new. Worse yet, it's one of the worst things a show can be. It's plain and simply boring. I was checking the time left on the episode less than 5 minutes in. Anime dropped this year, number 31, Beast Tamer. 2 episodes watched, 4 out of 10. I've noticed that we're getting some fantasy this season that aren't isekai. Very nice. Shame that that doesn't make a terrible amount of difference when it comes to most of them. This is another generic one to add to the pile. Main character gets kicked out of the hero's party because they don't realize his worth, teams up with someone way stronger than he is, and ends up proving he was the one with value all along while assembling his own party/harem along the way. Everything that you've seen before if you've been watching any recent fantasy anime. It's also got this thing where he can form contracts with creatures in order to tame them. Go figure with that title. It's also something that's been strangely prevalent for some reason, and it's no different here. At least it's less slavery framed than some other series, I suppose, but it's really weird that he found out the benefits only after he made the contract, so it didn't really seem like he needed to do that with a girl that was seemingly ready to just follow him around anyway, besides the fact that she asked him to. Also, it makes him seem pretty dumb that she knows more about his character class than him. It's also doing that thing I'm really starting to hate, where it pretends the main character isn't overpowered when he really is, the overdog posing as underdog trope, because he's from what's considered the worst class, but he also has a version of it that's completely godlike when compared to others of his type. You see, the problem is that this show would be more watchable if the characters weren't constantly being posed as being hit with the stupid stick all the time. Just in the 2nd episode, our lead wagers his new partner in a bet that he admits he doesn't think he can win, without even setting up that he gets something in return if he does win. He just wagers another person in a losing bet for no benefit to himself, and I'm left sitting there being well aware that it was just all a bad setup for the writer to show off some new power. It's a show where I'm left questioning the choices of the characters, and thus I see the man behind the curtain. It's bad writing. It's not absolutely god-awful, though. The characters are nice enough, and there's not really been any strong creep factor to things just yet, even if I know it's a harem set up from a mile away. For a show of this type, there seems to have been a deliberate effort to minimize fan service, which is always nice. It even got one laugh out of me when a character had their customer service voice lapse. It's one of those shows that I'm sure I would have watched all of when I was between the ages of like 10 and 12 and had lower standards, but for me now, it's just gonna have to be a pass. Anime dropped this year, number 32, The Human Crazy University, 2 episodes watched, 4 out of 10. Strangely enough, it is not just the animation and the look of this one that has me dropping it. I think that for what it is, it works fine, and it clearly has a style that it's going for and committing to. I can at least respect that, even if this sort of animation isn't exactly what I'm looking for out of the shows that I enjoy. However, I do think the entire thing is something that might have been better suited to being a short-form series rather than a full-length one, because as it is now, the episodes drag and feel like they're going on for too long. The presentation and everything is better suited to something that's a 10-minute web animation rather than a full 24-minute episode. It's ploddingly paced, which isn't helped by the fact that many of the shots are just of 2 characters in 3/4 profile talking to each other with the camera facing them from the chest up. Nearly the entire second episode being a flashback/cutaway didn't do this any favors either. The comedy also just isn't something that works for me either. I can see where it is trying to be funny, but none of those moments got me to laugh or anything like that. The writing also just takes big chunks of time to spew fun facts at you. In some contexts that works, but in others it feels like a jarring transition. I get the feeling that it's meant to be some kind of educational show, but it never commits to that either. It ends up feeling like it's half of a lot of things, but nothing whole. Anime dropped this year, number 33, Love Flops, 1 episode watched, 4 out of 10. I think I should be upfront that in general, harem comedies just aren't for me. There may have been 1 or 2 that I enjoyed when I was younger, but I doubt that I would hold the same fondness for them if I were to go back to them today. There's nothing saying that I wouldn't like a new one, but it has to be doing something special and be done in a certain way as to personally grab me. So this show was already kind of starting off from a hard sell, and there was little chance that I was going to like it much. And shocker, it wasn't for me in the slightest. This really did a speedrun of every single trope you can think of for meeting a harem character, and then threw in a few more on top of that for good measure. We had a literal banana in the pocket for the sake of a joke, and would you look at that, one of the ladies involved is the teacher too. Heck, we've even got a friend who knows weirdly specific details about these characters who are all transfer students who transferred in just today for no discernible reason. Okay, to be fair, even if you're only half paying attention to the episode, it's clear that there is some kind of shenanigans going on. There's some very specific mentions of the date, the aforementioned specific details from a friend that might as well be dropping blood type, the way that it's all a series of misunderstandings that are all cleared up near right away. A weird sequence with binary code at the start of the show, the way the alarm clock glitched out, the way the world is futuristic for literally no reason. This is all a pot shot at dating sims, right? At least it is on some level. Even from the first episode, you can see that there's going to be some kind of twist going on here. The problem is, I've been recently burned before. Do I think that this one's going to drag it out and keep teasing things? Not necessarily. However, this is an anime original, so I have no real idea of if or when it's going to show its hand. Smile of the Ars Notoria really burned me last season, waiting for a reveal or plot hook that never came, even after a full season of episodes. While yes, I could give this one more of a chance and see if whatever twist it has up its sleeve is going to hook me, I'm not willing to sit through done-to-death harem nonsense that I don't even like until it does, especially if I don't know how long it's going to be before that twist comes, if it ever does. This is one where I will pay attention to chatter to see if it does anything interesting, and maybe give it another peek if it does. After all, for me, the drop list is not the death penalty. I am willing to give shows another shot sometimes, but for now, this one is getting set aside. Anime dropped this year, number 34, Immoral Guild, 1 episode watched, 2 out of 10. This is just, once again, one of those cases where the show is 100% not for me. Sure, there are some people out there who will get a kick out of this or will get their jollies off, but that's not me. I could say something about how it's just riddled with fan service to the detriment of, well, everything else in the show, but this is another case where the fan service is really the whole point and the plot and the world are just there to facilitate it. I mean, that should be clear simply by the way that an uncensored version of this one exists at all. It's not that surprising that no service decided to pick this one up. The censorship of last season's Labyrinth in Another World was already complained about quite heavily by people who were interested in that show, and this one takes things further in its first episode than that one did in its first episode. So the more adult nature of it likely made it an easy pass for the typical anime streaming services. I mean, this one's breaking out the tentacles in the first 30 seconds. No penetration or anything, but this gets damn close to it, and the clothes fall off so easily you would think that they are 3 sizes too big if they weren't just skin tight to show off all the characters' assets just 2 shots ago. It's just not enjoyable as someone who's not interested in something that is purely fan service. There's some lip surface here for slice of life and fantasy elements, but that's not what anyone is coming to this show for, and the show is completely aware of that. It feels more like those aspects are time filler to get this to be full length instead of a short. It's sleazy, but then again, that's the whole point, so I can't get too mad about it, even if I want this one kept far, far away from me. The only enjoyment that I got was one laugh at how utterly ridiculous the breast physics are. It's one of those cases where you have to wonder if anyone making this has even touched or seen a real one. Anime dropped this year, number 35, The Emminance in Shadow. 2 episodes watched, 3 out of 10. Okay, as far as I can tell, this one's meant to be a comedy of sorts, pulling on the dramatic irony that what our protag thinks is all just a game to keep himself amused, the audience quickly realizes is actually happening. However, that's not something that's entirely landing for me. It's also not something I feel would be able to sustain an entire show for me either, so I'm really just cutting my losses here, especially since this one looks like it's going to be a longer running series. It's one of those things that is clearly edgelord type stuff, but is also trying to have a laugh at the edgelords at the same time. I mean, I get it. A lot of us go through that stupid phase at some point as teenagers, and it can be fun to have a laugh at that in retrospect. However, the show feels like it's trying to have its cake and eat it too, by both trying to make the protag something the butt of the joke, but also having it be that he's actually really a cool shadow boss with all these cool powers and tools and stuff. Like, yeah, I get the joke about him thinking it's all some game and it being real doesn't really work if he doesn't have something to back himself up when it does get real, but the playing to both sides of this doesn't really work either. It also doesn't help that 2 episodes in, the protagonist is really the only character that has anything. There was this girl in the first episode who has some real trauma that could have been interesting to explore, but given the way that episode 1 ends, we are never going to see her again, meaning her only real purpose was to be a temporary point of view character who is assaulted so we can meet the episode's fan service quota, and make the protagonist look cool when he saves her. Every other character is either some bit part that doesn't do all that much aside from 1 or 2 lines, or one of the little cabal that the protagonist has built up. Said cabal is made up of several different girls, some of them with animal ears, that are all functionally interchangeable and have little to no personality aside from obeying the orders of the protagonist. Oh, I'm sure 1 or 2 of them will get some kind of development later down the line. They are, after all on the poster. But my point is that if by the end of the 2nd episode, you only have 1 long-term character with any level of development, that doesn't bode well for the series, which is why I'm just gonna cut it out now. Anime dropped this year, number 36. I've somehow gotten stronger when I improved my farm-related skills. 1 episode watched, 3 out of 10. Oh look, another power fantasy anime. Who could have guessed? It's not like we get 5 of those a season or anything. Well, then again, this one does have one thing going for it in that it's not an isekai. However, it's still doing that same thing where a guy is just stronger than everyone else for seemingly no reason at all. Okay, yeah, the show says that he maxed out a whole bunch of farming related skills because farming is just all this guy has on his mind, but given his young age, I have to assume that maxing those skills out is something that any farmer would be able to do with enough time, so there's gotta be some other reason that he's just the strongest person ever aside from that. It would be one thing if this was just some guy hanging out on his farm all day like he clearly wants to. This guy has maybe 5 brain cells, and 4.5 of them are all dedicated to farming. He's all in, and that's what he wants. However, there's already a strong setup for him to just keep getting involved in other things, so I doubt we're going to spend that much time on the farm in the long run. It's one of those cases where the show clearly has one joke, and it's not even a joke that is told particularly well. It's just a show that's not for me. This isn't the kind of thing I enjoy watching, and even if it was, this seems like it's one of the more generic and standard ones that's not doing anything new. Also, as a side note, I'm getting pretty tired of most fantasy anime having to contextualize everything through an RPG stat block that characters can just pull up out of nowhere for no reason. It's tired, dull, and most of the time it's taking away more from the world building rather than adding to it. Anime dropped this year, number 37, More Than a Married Couple But Not Lovers. 1 episode watched, 3 out of 10. It's always a nearly immeasurable disappointment when a show that looks completely beautiful and has a color palette that I absolutely adore ends up having a story and characters that I just cannot get behind. Like, it's so pretty, but I cannot put myself through watching it. In this case, it's one where the premise is never able to get off the ground. A school has a program where students get paired up in boy-girl pairs and have to live with each other as a married couple would. On the face, it's a terrible premise that would never exist, could never work, would be far too expensive for what would be little to no results, and frankly, just straight up doesn't make sense. I know it's there for the sake of the story, but when I can't suspend my disbelief for the premise, it makes it hard to engage with anything past that point. It opens up a whole box of issues right off the bat. There's a chance to get paired with someone that you are simply completely incompatible with, which would lead to an inability to succeed on any level. The coercive nature of the entire thing being graded leads to any situation of intimacy not being able to have any actual consent to it. The fact that it's graded seems to leave little room for the idea that married life would look different for different couples, forcing students into what the grader would consider the married couple mold, which leaves a whole question of its own as to how much the entire thing might enforce strict gender roles on these teenagers. And the thing is, if this show was about how a program like this is incredibly flawed and different types of intimacy that different people can find, even if those fall outside the norm of relationships, it could be an interesting exploration of relationships and emotions. But that's not what this is. This is a love triangle or love square seinen romance that shoves in distracting fan service all over the place. It doesn't seem interested in any of that because the goal of the main characters is to pretend the best so that they can rise up the point rankings and swap partners to the person they like. But we all know from the outset that it's going to be a fake dating leads to real dating situation. There is some interesting content you could mine from a premise like this, but because of where the show is putting its focus, it's clear that it's not interested in any of that. It's going to do exactly what it says on the box. Which, if that's what you want and you want some heavy fan service to go with it, I'm sure that this will scratch the itch fine enough. However, I find the main characters to be insufferable and annoying, and I cannot get myself past that premise if we're not going to do anything more than the I'm faking it, but I'm actually falling for them. It's a hard pass for me, even if the colors are pretty. Anime dropped this year, number 38, Shinobi No Ittoki. 2 episodes watched, 3 out of 10. So this is just one where the show's not really grabbing me. From the summary, it didn't sound like it was going to be anything special, and as I was watching it, I just kind of felt bored the whole time. Like, yeah, there's action that's done in a pretty flashy way, but I never really felt engaged at all by it. Sure, I could sit around longer and see if it is eventually able to grab me, but I didn't really connect with any of the characters either, so it feels best for me to just jump off the ride here. It doesn't help that the whole thing kind of feels like it's lacking any stakes. We had a moment in the first episode where a police officer gets his throat cut out of nowhere, which did have me sitting up and paying a little more attention. But when the next thing you know, it turns out that it was faked and he just gets up, my interest went right back out the window again. It wants to have that edginess, but without the lasting impact that that would require. Even worse, I'm left sitting with the feeling that a lot of the characters were just kind of hit with the stupid stick in this one. I understand that in order to make a series like this engaging, we need to be brought into this new world and culture alongside the protagonist. You can have him be in the know, sure, but that would require some info dumping towards the audience, which tends to slow a series down, which is why that's something that tends to get avoided in favor of simply having everything be new to at least one of the main characters. That being said, it's really hard to pull off the main character not being in the know when near every other character around him knows what's going on, and he is also the heir to the ninja clan. They just decided not to tell him. They could maybe make the excuse that this really isn't stuff for kids and they wanted to keep him out of it until he reached a certain age. However, you can't use that excuse when the childhood best friend character is also one of the ones who is very much in the know and has clearly been trained from childhood. I'm sure that on the whole, this will be one that's just kind of fine and will be forgotten in a season or two, but it's not engaging me in any way aside from the animation looking pretty good now and then, so I'm just not gonna bother. Anime dropped this year, number 39, The Little Lies We All Tell, 2 episodes watched, 4 out of 10. The big problem with comedy anime is that they're in general going to be hit or miss depending on your personal sense of humor. I've had plenty that I've liked over the years, but sometimes there's one that just isn't able to hit right with me, and The Little Lies We All Tell is one of them. The premise is simple. 4 characters that all have something they're trying to hide from the others, and in trying to hide it, shenanigans ensue. I suppose the easiest way to go over how this isn't working for me is to just run down the list of those 4 characters. First, we have the one who is a ninja, and simply put, I just don't feel like there's that much to her. In fact, her joke is one that we see a lot, the prim girl with a secret badass side. Now, there's nothing wrong to telling a joke more than once, it's just that there's nothing about her that's really interesting me, and she runs into the problem that we kind of know what the punchline is going to be each time. The one good joke that they did tell with her was with her not wanting to do the ninja house for a school festival because of the shallow view of ninjas that was a deep insult to her culture, but not being able to say anything about it without outing herself. Then we have the little girl who's an alien. Once again, it's just the same thing where I kind of know what the punchline's going to be every time, so I'm not super entertained by her. I will say that she's marginally more interesting because you can do weird things with her due to her alien nature, but she's still never getting me to laugh out loud. We also have the one who is secretly a boy in an all-girls school, and if you were wondering if there's any kind of trans story to that, no, there's not. The explanation is simply that he was strong-armed into it by his twin sister so she could go to his all-boys school and thus get with her crush. I should also point out the trope of boy dresses up as a girl to sneak into an all-girls space is not a neutral thing to just throw into your media. It has implications, and it has harmful ones at that. There is some attempt to navigate around this here, but it's still kind of an elephant in the room. It doesn't help that he's playing the straight man to everything crazy going on around him, so he's not even getting any strong laughs out of the premise either. Then we come to the girl who's a telepath, so she knows what's going on with the other 2 girls, but her power only works on women, so she can't read the one boy's mind and give him away. The biggest problem is that she is having her show air at the same time as Spy Family. Her gimmick of being the one who knows everything because of her telepathic powers is the same as Anya, but unfortunately she's not as expressive or reactionary as Anya is, and I think normally I would find this character funnier, but I'm getting the same joke as her done better in a different show every week, which ends up dulling her sparkle. I have no doubt that there are plenty of people who will find this show infinitely funnier than I have and will have a good time with it. However, for me, a comedy show that hasn't gotten me to outright laugh after 2 full episodes in this packed of a season is one that I have to pass on. That being said, maybe I'll come back to it later. Anime dropped this year, number 40. Management of a Novice Alchemist, 3 episodes watched, 4 out of 10. Another one where I was so hopeful just to be so disappointed. You see, I love the idea of a show about someone freshly entering adult life in a fantasy world, going somewhere new to practice their trade. For example, I love Kiki's Delivery Service. However, the difference is that Kiki's Delivery Service is very much a coming-of-age story, and Management of a Novice Alchemist is very much a bog-standard fantasy anime with some cute girls doing cute things elements to it. Unfortunately, over the 3 episodes I watched, I ended up just kind of being bored after the first one. The thing that made me sit up and take notice was that the main character basically pulled an American healthcare system by being super upfront that she was going to charge a lot of money to save someone's life. But that was really the only spark this got out of me, especially when she just admitted later that she probably would have saved the person even if they had no money. Like, yeah, I get it. We don't want our cute girl main character to look like a monster because she refused to save the life of a person with no money, but it just kind of ended up deflating any of the tension that that scenario provided. Then we just got to the back end of the 3rd episode, and I ended up turned off the whole thing altogether. The plot at this point is resolving around super dangerous fire bears, and it rubs in how these things are dangerous and they need to plan carefully and all work together in order to deal with the issue. And our main character is able to handle them without any issue and even take down the boss monster enhanced one all on her own with just a piddly little sword. Once again, tension deflated. I understand that this is a cute girls doing cute things show at the core, but if you are going to set up stakes and danger, you need to follow through with that. In this kind of a setup, I'm also just more of a fan of the idea that she wouldn't be able to do any of the dangerous stuff on her own since her talents are in alchemy, that she might need to, I don't know, rely a little more on the community, like when they helped her fix up her place. I thought we were getting a show about the importance of community bonds and each person having their own strengths, not an overpowered girl rolling into town and fixing everything. To be fair, though, it's not like the show is god-awful or anything. Someone who's around for the cute girls, cute things vibes will likely like this well enough, but I'm just not really personally able to get invested, so I'm gonna pass. Anime dropped this year, number 41. My Master Has No Tail. 4 episodes watched, 5 out of 10. Yes, I have only watched 4 episodes when, at the time that I am recording this, the 9th episode just came out. This is one of those cases that, due to a variety of reasons, I fell behind on the series. I watched the first 4 episodes week to week, and when I came back, I just couldn't push myself through that 5th one. I had already been losing interest when episode 4 initially aired, and when I came back to watch the 5th after my break, my interest was just fully gone. I think there's a variety of reasons for this. Firstly, I'm just not all that interested in Rakugo in the first place. I do think it's nifty, but it falls into the same category as manzai comedy for me, where it's very culturally specific and it's hard for the wordplay to come across in translation well. I appreciate the work that goes into the performance aspect 100%, but it's just not a subject that I connect with or am interested in viewing. Add to that the characters weren't connecting with me either. Like, they're fine at filling out the archetypes that they're meant to fill, but after 4 episodes, I couldn't really say that I liked any of them in particular, or even felt that there were any strong relationships among the cast, except maybe that between Mameda and Shirara. I can't put my finger on exactly why none of them are connecting with me, but if I had to give it my best guess, I think it's just a lot of them feel a bit shallow even after getting a few good episodes in. I'm sure some of them will grow into some depth by the end of the series, but I find myself unable to care enough to stick around and watch that happen. It's a shame because I think this show is very visually well made. The characters are well animated and the characters really pop in this one in a way I like. I don't think I'm personally into the look it has though when it puts the very HD, crisp characters and a more fuzzy and watercolor background, but that's just me. It looks fine, but it's not my favorite. This show does go the route of animating a scene to go along with the Rakugo, which I am a bit of two minds about. On one hand, yes, it is using the medium of animation to the fullest extent that it can, but at the same time, for a show about the bewitching power that Rakugo has, it may have been better to let the art form speak for itself, and put the effort that went into that scene into putting a lot of detail into the animation of the performer to sell that performance more. Also, there's a segment at the end of each episode where it has the main character go through the Rakugo performance of the episode and basically explain all the jokes to you, which I think can be fine enough for the more complex Rakugo stories that might not click right away. But for the really straightforward and simple ones like the show presents at first, it feels like the show is committing the cardinal sin of having to explain the joke to us.